Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Crowdsman Show. I am your host, Jared Downey. You will see Gowdy Molina in a moment when she reads out the ads, but she doesn't get to film with me when I get two guests on because she's got to monitor all the lights and cameras and mics and everything else that goes into this. So today on the show, we have HollyFrontier Lubricants and Specialties, which includes the Petro-Canada Lubricants brand. Now, we're going to be looking at this from a sales side, from a customer service side, a technical support. There's quite a bit to cover when you get into, mines and oil operations where HollyFrontier is servicing their clients. So we're going to have, let me get my names right. We're going to have Gord Susinski. He's a senior advisor of technical services at the oil sands. And then Barnady Ngai, he's a district sales manager, Central Region at HollyFrontier Lubricants and Specialties. And now, which Petro-Canada Lubricants brand goes under that. So I'm going to hand it over to Gowdy. We got a ton of stuff to cover today, so stay with us. We're going to hand it over to Gowdy for the sponsorship, and we'll be right back with our guests.
Alrighty, so today we've got AutoSol. AutoSol solves the challenges of securely collecting and sharing data at scale for industrial SCADA automation environments. Whether your data is on the edge, on your server, or in the cloud, AutoSol can handle it. Regardless of the protocol, device, communication method, legacy asset, or HMI requirement, AutoSol tailors their historical, real-time, and edge-pulling engines to suit your needs. Their proven platform sets the standard for data delivery with ultra-reliable access to isolated field devices. Visit autosoln.com for more information. That's autosoln.com. You can also check out their interview episode, which is episode 30 on Crownsman Energy. We also have Savannah Equipment. Did you know that Savannah Equipment is an electrical supplier in both Canada and the United States? Their electrical inventory includes breakers, disconnects, TEFC electric motors, starters, tech cable, cab tire, motor control centers, and transformers. For your new and refurbished electrical equipment, you can visit savannahEquipment.com, where you will find more equipment every day. Next up, we also have Cal Tire Mining Tire Group. Whatever your goal is, reducing costs, improving uptime, or fulfilling sustainability commitments, Cal Tire's Mining Tire Group has proven solutions to help you reach your targets. With proactive planning, tire management innovation, and highly trained team members at Cal Tire, they believe you can expect more at every stage of a tire's life. To learn more, you can visit them at caltiremining.com or email at info@caltire.com. And last but not least, we've got PowerZone. When you need a specialized team of world-class engineers for your oil and gas pipelines, dewatering, or any fluid handling needs, you want to visit powerzone.com. In addition to their inventory of rebuilt pumps, motors, engines, they also have an amazing team to design and engineer your systems, no matter the challenge, no matter the location. Get in the zone with PowerZone. Visit them at powerzone.com.
Hello, Gord. Hello, Barnaby. Good to see you on the show.
Thank you for having us. Good to see you too.
Good to see you, Jared. Glad to be on.
Yeah, no, it's good. There's your team put together a lot of notes, and yourselves put together lots of notes. There's lots to cover, a lot of technical information, which is what this show is built for. So I kind of want to get into it quick, but before we do, I wanted to just sort of put out, maybe over to you, Barnaby. I think this is sort of your division of sort of giving us that broad scope of HollyFrontier and the Petro-Canada Lubricants brand.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jared. So yeah, a little bit about HollyFrontier Corporation. So we're headquartered in Dallas, Texas. We're an independent petroleum refiner that produces and markets high-value light products such as gasoline, diesel, fuel, jet fuel, and modified asphalt. We also produce and market lubricants and specialty products, which is what we're here to chat about today. And basically, they're marketed in the United States, Canada, and the Netherlands under the Petro-Canada Lubricants brand, Red Giant Oil, Sonneborn, and HollyFrontier Specialty Products and Brands. So let me talk just a little bit about Petro-Canada Lubricants in detail here. So we are a HollyFrontier business. We pretty much produce, blend, and package lubricants pretty much from start to finish there. And we export those to 80 countries on 6 continents. We specialize in not only the products, but the services along with that to maximize equipment performance, productivity, and overall savings. In terms of the product line, it ranges from everything from heavy duty engine oils all the way to ATF, gear oils, greases, etc. So it's a very the breadth and depth is there, and we're all about being a problem solver and delivering innovative products to the market.
When you said 80 countries, is that right?
Absolutely, yeah.
I think one of these days we're going to have a show. We'll get you and a couple other the big companies that we have on, and just to unpack supply chain management, because it's absolutely mind blowing to me how companies like yourselves can distribute out products at that scale. It's absolutely amazing. So
it's not an easy task, Jared.
No,
easy task.
No. So just quickly, I want to jump over to Gord here in a moment, Barney. But what is your role within the company? Sort of your day to day.
Yeah, so I'm the district sales manager for Central Region in Canada. So that pretty much encompasses Ontario, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. And basically, what my team does is we manage pretty much start to finish, cradle to grave there around our lubricants portfolio there. And that includes everything from the sales cycle to the technical services as well. And that's basically all the day-to-day management of our existing customer base, and that ranges from mining to construction, food, general manufacturing. It's a very wide range of segments and customers we deal with. And then from a technical side, as Gord will talk to in greater detail in a bit here, we also look after pretty much all the technical aspects of it. So, technical support, technical savings solutions, lube audits, lube surveys, etc. So I look after that team, and really it's our goal to bring the Petro-Canada Lubricants value proposition to life with our customers.
Yeah, we're going to do an interesting thing today on the show. Is we're going to look at it from sort of that technical, that advisor standpoint from Gord, and then we're going to bring you back in to sort of to walk through that communication aspect of it and everything like that. So to Gord, I'm going to jump over to you now, because I'd like to just sort of have an understanding of your role as an advisor. Even for me, it's I actually am trying to understand what there's so many parts when you talk about lubricant services. I've done some research on it. So can you sort of walk us through what your day-to-day is, or what the setup is for you?
Sure. My role as a senior advisor is I specialize in mining for HollyFrontier Lubricants and Specialties. So my primary function day to day is I look after 5 oil sands mines up in northern Alberta. And that function is to be the technical lead and main technical resource for product application and lubricants application for that customer base. So from a day-to-day point of view, if our customers have any questions about products or applications, or need a technical resource on how those products work in their pieces of equipment or product recommendations, anything like that, that's where they'll involve me to come forth with that technical knowledge and explain to them why we put certain lubricants in certain applications and how they work, or in some cases, how they don't work. An example would be a new piece of equipment arrives at the mine site and it comes with a manual that's several hundred pages long. We have the expertise to go through that detail and find those little bits of information that will mean something in terms of making the correct product recommendation for that piece of equipment in that given application.
That I have to ask, just my own curiosity, is the manual always right? Is it a guideline, or is it sort of the absolute when you're looking at these?
The manual is a great source of information. We have found mistakes in some manuals, and in some cases, the manuals become outdated. As the equipment or replacement parts go into a piece of equipment that's failed, for example, those replacement parts might be new or updated, and we have to tweak the product recommendations a little bit. So looking at the manual is something we do anyway, just to get a breadth of scope from the OEM, what kind of product recommendations they want, or what kind of temperature range they want, or in a lot of cases in recent years, what kind of additive chemistry they're looking for, and content of additive systems.
So are you actually building out a plan? I mean, I'm sure some of these mines you said there's five. They're in pretty extreme weather conditions. So are you
Mhm.
building out a whole plan for them for each individual piece of equipment then?
It's getting that way. Years ago, making a product recommendation was fairly simple. If we go back to the beginning of my career 30 years ago, the equipment was fairly advanced. The technology that we we're using from the lubricants perspective was advanced, but every few years it's advancing further and further. And it really has come down to making a specific recommendation for a specific piece of equipment. As much as we try to recommend the same engine oil, for example, for all the engines used on site. But in some cases, each OEM now wants to have their specific specifications and guidelines followed to lubricate their piece of equipment. So it's becoming less and less typical to be able to do that in the new pieces of equipment with the new chemistry that's available in our lubricants.
So do you ever run into cases where somebody's got maybe three-quarters of their fleet is one, and then they bring in new ones, and do you ever come in on the tail end, or do they have you coming in before they start lubricating these pieces of equipment? Or do you run into cases where you're actually essentially solving a problem that's actually actively happening?
We would prefer to be brought in before the equipment's purchased. That way we can scope out what the OEM requirements are going to be and what the governing bodies like American Petroleum Institute or Society of Automotive Engineers or ASTM requirements are to make sure that we have those products available on site. So we're not bringing additional products in site. I can remember working in an underground mining operation where a piece of equipment was purchased from overseas. And when it arrived on site, the lubricant specification they wanted wasn't available in North America by any supplier. So they had a piece of equipment sitting there and they couldn't put the right chemistry in it to make it work. So we ask our customers, if you're going to buy a new piece of equipment, please involve us at the beginning and we'll make sure that we have those lubrication needs satisfied before that piece of equipment arrives on site.
So what about things like equipment failure and things like that? I mean, obviously things do go wrong. Or do they? I mean, obviously they've got their heavy duty mechanics and that, but if seals are going and things like that, are you part of that process as well?
Absolutely. Um, we engage with our customers on any kind of failure analysis. First and foremost, we have a process that we run through when we make recommendations. And ideally, if we can, we run through a brief kind of FEMA or failure mode affected analysis is what could go wrong. And we start with product compatibility, elastomer, seal compatibility, equipment compatibility. Are we meeting the OEM specs? Are we meeting API specs? What are we looking at for drain intervals in terms of service? What are the ambient operating conditions? So there is a very set process that we follow when we start making recommendations, and in particularly when we're doing a failure analysis, because although it's important to understand what caused that failure to begin with, it's just as important to put corrective measures and things in going forward so that it doesn't happen again.
I actually, and I probably should have led off with this. I kind of wanted to understand the scope because it's one of those things. It's like, actually, I would say probably 80% of the things on our show that we talk about, it's so easy to, the big piece of machinery. Obviously, it's oil. People kind of understand that, they've got a car, it's just a giant version of that. And
Mhm.
then you've got, the lifting part of the equipment, the hydraulics, and all that sort of stuff. But when you're talking about these operations that you're servicing, I mean, it's not just the heavy vehicles. You're talking pumps and engines and all sorts of things. So, what is sort of the scope of what you're actually servicing on a mine or in the oil sands?
Typically, up in the oil sands, it's all driven by mobile equipment. So, of course, first and foremost, you have the haul trucks that everybody recognizes, that the large dump trucks. Typically, what's running up in the oil sands is a 400-ton payload truck. And your average size oil sands mine is going to have somewhere between 90 and 110 trucks, which is a fairly significant fleet. And there'd be a couple of key manufacturers that supply those trucks for those applications. But beyond that, we also deal with graders, bulldozers, what we call tracks and auxiliary equipment. In some cases, there's pipe handlers. So the amount of equipment that we deal with can vary really from soup to nuts. Most even have dredges that operate in ponds. And so it's as funny as it sounds, we also do a little bit of work with what we term kind of a marine application.
Mm.
So there is a whole lot that goes into a mining operation for sure.
Gordon, I just wanted to just sort of circle back to something that you talked about, managing mixed fleets, consolidating down your product lines, which, from the outside looking in, what is that process? Because if the specifications are fairly exact that are coming from these OEMs, that you have to then, because I mean, I've been to some of these sites, some of them are quite mixed fleets. So can you sort of walk us through that?
Sure. It's a lot more complicated today than it was going back, say, 20 or 25 years ago. The lubricant recommendations were a lot easier back then. We didn't have as many products. Although the chemistry was advanced, it's not to the levels it is today. And there has been a lot of change. We've seen the hardware get more and more advanced. We've seen the lubricants get more and more advanced and more focused on their application. And we've also seen our customer base become more and more knowledgeable in what they're doing on the site. And it's careful not to get it drug into a one solution fits all, because it really doesn't anymore. It's important to have the expertise of a tribologist from your oil manufacturing company to help select the right lubricants for your equipment. If we went back a long time ago, we used to put engine oil in the engine. You could put engine oil in the transmission. Engine oil went in the hydraulics. You literally could go run a small dozer with one oil, and you couldn't do that now. With mixed fleets, it's even more complicated in that trying to consolidate the products, because you have an engine oil that's specific to the engine application. You have a transmission oil that's specific to the transmission. And in some cases, we have transmissions and drivetrain oil that share reservoirs, so they lubricate transmissions, differentials, and hydraulics. And you have to be careful because those oils are blended with a very specific chemistry to perform in those functions. And we have to be careful that surface mines have a different focus than, say, an underground mine. So if you have a mine that has both applications, you've really got two very different dynamics. So on the surface, for example, you have to deal with extreme temperature variations. In northern Alberta this past summer, for example, you could deal with plus 40 degrees on a regular basis. And then in the winter, you're going to deal with minus 40, where my experience tells me if you go 4,000 feet underground in a mine, the temperature is a very constant 80 to 82 degrees. Emissions are more important underground because now you have people in an environment that are breathing those exhaust emissions in. Right. Although the mines are still well ventilated, it's still a very serious consideration. So the lubricant choices in an underground mine are significantly different than what you would have to deal with on the surface, for example. So managing a mixed fleet's lubricants needs is very complex. So if you're consolidating or even considering consolidating lubricants, you should have and seek out some technical advice from your lube supplier or a technical expert tribologist.
Barnaby, I just want to jump over to you for a second on this, because if you're heading up a sale of a product, or you're working with your team, if you landed me at a job at a major mine tomorrow and I pick up the phone and call you, I'd be a little more prepared. I wouldn't have been prepared. I'd be going, okay, here's our fleet. And if you start talking about what Gord's talking about, I'm going, whoa. I just needed some engine oil. Is that still a process, or are these companies pretty up to date now? When they're talking to you, do they know there's a whole system that's going to go into place if they have these large fleets?
Yeah, that's a good question, Jared. And I mean, it's there's no one size fits all. So I think you nailed it there in terms of one of the first steps is understanding what the fleet looks like, the makeup of it, and then the operating conditions. And so, I'll talk a little bit later, when we chat about onboarding and that process. But basically, we sit down with the customer and really try to assess what's your baseline, right? And then what's the level of knowledge. Gord nailed it earlier when he said, our customers, our mining operations are just a lot more sophisticated, a lot more knowledgeable. So, we do find that folks are coming to us with that level of expertise, or I think we can add value, or we do add value, is we take it to that next level. And so it's everything Gord talked about in terms of just really delving down into all the details. And, while Gord talks about, you got to be careful, and there is a lot of complexities dealing with a mixed fleet, different components, et cetera, that you need to factor into your decision, there absolutely is an opportunity to consolidate oils. And so what that does is lend itself to simplifying the operations, obviously avoiding misapplication. And then there's also the almighty tangible savings that can come out of that. So, it's a little bit of a mixed bag, but we do sit down with the customers to basically get an accurate baseline and then move from there.
Gord, going back over to you, I wanted to actually, this is a show about business, so I have no problem doing shameless product plugs. No, but I really did want to understand a couple things. So, because I was looking over the notes that were put together. So, if you were so what would be an example? Let's say, because I'm looking at things, it's like a 24/7 operation,
Right.
and it's minus 40. Oh. So if you get that, do you then say, okay, this product, is it like a branded product that you're bringing in, or like, do they know what they're like, what are they actually physically seeing at their site? What are you bringing to them?
What we're bringing to them is I like to say I'm the liaison between the customer and the research and development lab. I understand their equipment, but also understand the chemistry that helps to make that equipment operate. And so what I bring to the table is the product expertise and the application expertise. And I'll give you an example. Is we have a situation where we have hydraulics that are using a very light oil in the winter so that they guarantee it works when it's 40 below. But then in the summer, they switch over to a heavier oil so that they can work with the plus 40 temperatures in the summer. And what I've done, and my colleagues that I work with, is we come to the customer and said, we have a synthetic multi-graded product that works all season in our Perduro product line, that you can eliminate seasonal changeouts and potentially extend the drain intervals on a hydraulic system, for example, and possibly lengthen the life of the equipment. And we help them make that change and work through it and give them that knowledge to be able to make those changes confidently.
What about this other thing? Again, looking through these notes, I saw that the no idle. And can you talk a little bit more about that? Because I didn't get a chance to look over it much, but it seemed interesting. These no idle policies that are now in place.
There are a lot of no idle policies out there, and I think most mines probably have them. And if they don't, if they don't have a written policy, they probably have something in place that they follow. So what the typical no idle policy will be is that if you're not in the equipment and it's not actively doing any work, you have to shut it down to save fuel and reduce emissions. However, there's some things that work against that. If it's really, really cold, you have to leave the equipment running for operator comfort and safety. And conversely, when it's really, really hot, you have to allow it to run so that there's air conditioning for driver comfort and safety. However, you get into some mining operations that say they don't run 24 hours a day. They run till 11 o'clock at night and they shut the piece of equipment down till 7 o'clock in the morning, whereas 30 years ago, they would just let them idle overnight.
Yeah.
Because they're worried about that cold start in the morning. So in a 24/7 application, you can run with a conventional engine oil, but if you're going to shut it down for a period overnight, you may have to convert to a 0W or a 5W synthetic to allow you that cold starting. So we take the no idle policies into consideration when we're making product recommendations. against the duty cycle and the ambient conditions of where the mine's located.
Okay, moving on to this. I'm tempted to keep unpacking some of this stuff, but I want to actually cover a few other things. That's the problem with having me as an interviewer. I get into it. No, working with directly with, we're looking at it from a customer side. Again, from the notes I saw, like with the strut oil, you'll actually be collaborating with the OEM. Can you help me understand that a little bit? Are you actually, I mean, I'm assuming you're not working with their actual manufacturing team. Are you just trying to identify specifications? What is that set up when you're back facing towards the OEM?
So the strut oil program that we ran was actually very, very unique. And it's something that only happens, once every 5 or 10 years, but it really is kind of a good news story where some of these large haul trucks have strut or suspension systems that you fill with oil. And what ended up happening is the OEM specifies a additive that you have to put into the oil before you put it in the strut system. And this additive contains a friction modifier. And this is to reduce wear or improve the ride for operators and be easier on the equipment and the frame. And the customer unknowingly said to a colleague of mine, I've got my mechanics on the shop floor mixing this additive with the oil that we're putting in the struts. And I really don't like my heavy duty mechanic being, kind of a driveway chemist and mixing these things because there's so many variables that can go wrong there. And they were experiencing odd failures and some sealing compatibility issues because of over or under dosing, which could happen. So because we act as a partnership with our customers and a lot of external factors, we engaged everybody from our sales and marketing team, our research and development folks, our OEM advisors in the US, and the OEM. And we all got together and said, what is the opportunity for HollyFrontier Lubricants and Specialties to buy that additive from the OEM and pre-dose the oil for you under the supervision of a master blender at our refinery? And the light bulb started going off about, we could solve a lot of problems here because we've got somebody that understands how delicately balanced this chemistry is, and they can make the right dosage in a lab environment or a refinery environment versus doing it on the shop floor. And so after a little while of investigating this with all these interested parties, we developed a PC suspension fluid. So now we market that and sell that directly to this particular customer for that OEM, but it is available to everybody, but it's specific to one make and model of haul truck that your mechanic's no longer mixing chemistries in the shop floor. He's buying it as a prepackaged product and it goes straight into the strut and everything works fine. So a very, very kind of unique operation where we brought a whole bunch of parties together to work collaboratively and demonstrate our expertise in being able to solve that kind of a unique problem.
Yeah, when you said that, I remembered as I think I was probably 17 or 18. I remember mixing oils.
Yes.
And it was
It sounds simple.
Barnaby, I don't think you can talk about oil sands, mine, lubricants, 80 countries without talking about some of these remote areas that HollyFrontier and Petro-Canada Lubricants brand is getting sent to. Can you talk a little bit about that process? Because that scope just in itself, we're talking ice roads and boats and the whole deal. Just sort of that outline of the delivery process itself.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point, Jared. I mean, we talk a lot about high performing products and how do you maximize the benefits, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, if you can't get the product there, it's kind of a pointless exercise. So, whether that be delivering to 80 countries or just even if you think about Canada alone, and the climates and the remoteness, the challenges of delivering up in the oil sands, that Gord's talking about, or even Northern Ontario into the gold mines. Many of these locations are remote in nature. There's a lot of climate challenges, whether it be the hot or the cold. And so when you look at logistics, really you got to look at, what's your infrastructure, right? So what's your logistics infrastructure, whether that be, warehousing, transportation, associates / distributors. And, I'm sure that it'll pop up on the screen at some point, but, there's a nice visual I like to go to, and you really look at our coverage, whether that be our own warehousing manufacturing plant, located in Mississauga, Ontario, to the sheer number of branded Petro-Canada branded distributors that we've got throughout the country. You're really covered. There's no location that we aren't, within a reachable distance. So when you look at, things like the ice roads that you mentioned there, Jared, and sea lifts, you got a extremely short window of time to be able to deliver the product. So, you got things like your manufacturing delays, which happen, as good as you are, but you've also even got carrier delays. And so, one of the things we look at is ensuring the product is as close as possible to the supply point. And then also second is, do we have contingency plans? Because I can't stress enough that if you miss that window, product's not moving up to that location, and it can mean an operation shutdown. And that's the last thing we want to do. Obviously from a product standpoint, we want to make sure the product is performing, but we also want to make sure that it gets there on time and in full. So there's a lot of planning. We've got a lot of smart people that are working, in our logistics group, and a lot of contingency planning. And I think that's the key in terms of that security of supply.
I kind of wanted to tie this all together. Gord, you and I have talked, and you've been in the industry for a long time, and just sort of that culture, that planning culture that sort of seems to be part of. I mean, on our show, we're talking to a lot of people that are very, they're very methodical with how they're planning out. So I'm not on the ground, so maybe I'm perceiving it wrong, but it seems like there's a big culture of planning, and then Barnaby going also to how, now dealing with, the sophistication of the customers, and how that all sort of ties together. When you're talking, I'll throw this over to either one of you. Do you need to create the urgency, or most of these companies nowadays, they're going to err on the side of caution, I would assume, these days?
I can start with that one. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I find there's very little risk taking now.
Yeah.
Back in the old days, there was a lot of damn the torpedoes, kind of just make it run. Mm-hmm. And there's a little less of that now, and people are so much more informed. 25 years ago, we didn't have Google. We didn't have the resources that are available. A lot of times we're talking to customers that have already done their homework before they call us, and they have an idea of what they're already looking for, and they're just relying on us for that, for lack of a better description, clinical expertise to nail down what their research is either right or wrong.
Yeah, I'd agree with Gord. I would say that our customers are definitely more informed, more educated. They've done a lot of pre-work. But I would also say that there is absolutely an expectation that as a lubricant solution provider, as experts, whether that be from the sales or the tech angle, our customers are looking for us to bring them solutions, share best practices. We have the luxury there. Gord mentioned he works with 4 large oil sands, but we've got a large group of technical service folks across the country here, and we do share a lot of best practices. And so, that the obvious one is sharing best practices within the mining community, but there are also improvements that we're seeing in other industries, whether it be construction, on-road fleet, general manufacturing, that we're able to then take and share with our customers. So, something that we aim to do, day in and day out, is to bring those solutions that the customer might not have at the forefront. there, or might have entertained years back, but because of, various reasons, they didn't move forward with it. And that's where we can bring that expertise and really delving down into that, putting together a plan, like I said, sharing the best practices, and putting together what that means in terms of the operation. So is it maximized uptime, preventative maintenance? We talk a lot about, Jared, you said they're planning. And, I don't want to not address that as well, but, you're seeing a lot of customers that are really getting on board in terms of preventative maintenance.
Yeah.
And so, you're seeing this shift here from reactive, something happened and we've got to bring the unit in, and we'll work, collaboratively in partnership with our customers to make sure we do the root cause, and, Gord touched on all that piece of it. But I think, looking forward, and as customers get more sophisticated, and we're having those detailed conversations, we're starting to look at, what can we do to prevent that? What can we do to avoid that downtime? And then what can we do to save the operations money? All that goes down to the bottom line. So that's those are key areas we focus on a daily basis.
I don't. I might not even be saying this in the right way, but I'll give it a shot. Even in doing our show, the actual interview takes maybe an hour. All the work goes into everything in the front end and the back end. This is actually about the easiest part of the whole process. When you're, I guess the comparison would actually be, once you have all the right stuff and just putting the oil in the engine is the easy part. But when you're onboarding these clients, Barnaby, that process of identifying pain points, bringing in someone like Gord, identifying the right products, getting their fleet management system. And I kind of asked this already, but maybe just unpack it a bit more. Are customers ready for that process? Or I would ask it different, actually, now that some of these other answers you've given. Are they expecting that process, like as in more demanding that process, that whole onboarding process that you have to go through? Can you just walk us through it? Because it seems like it's something that could easily be underrated.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question there, Jared, and you're absolutely right. Devil's in the details, the planning in advance, all of that stuff. It takes weeks, it takes months. There's a big cross-functional group that works on that, let's call it onboarding plan. Especially when we've got new customers that come on board. So it's a very long, robust, thorough process, and it ranges from everything to, it might sound simple, but just who's your tech advisor, right? Here's Gord Susinski. What does he do? What's he tasked with? It's about connecting the people on their end to the right stakeholders on our end. Who's your sales point of contact? How do you order product? Those are some of the basics that are part of the onboarding process. But what we're very proud of, and what we've spent a lot of time and focus on in terms of our onboarding process, is once you've got that fundamental piece. So I know who to go to if I have a technical issue. I know who to go to if I've got a sales issue. I know who to go to order product. What does that whole process look like? The next step is really, then let's look at your operation. Let's look at your fleet. Let's establish a baseline. Let's identify any issues you're currently running into that you want to get addressed. Let's set that appropriate baseline. Let's take all that information, and then together we can then put together a lubricants program that can be rolled out. And we're looking at things, short term, right? So we're looking at some low hanging fruit there, but we're also looking at longer term. What are some of the objectives that the customer wants to achieve? One could be, I want to save on fuel, because it's a large expenditure.
Right.
And so if we take it back to what Gord was talking about, maybe there's something around moving to something like a Duron synthetic 540, which is our heavy duty engine oil, that could allow for less idling because it has that cold temperature ability at startup. So, those are the type of of questions and discussions that we have as part of our onboarding program. And it's unique in that there's no start and finish really, right? So it's not like once we get a mine up and running and it's, 2 months later, this process ends. It really is a very dynamic and ongoing process, such that we can continuously improve year over year, month over month. And I say this a lot. Our sales team will say this a lot, and folks like Gord, we're really focusing on value generation here. And that could be in the realm of uptime, assisting, supporting a preventative maintenance program. And then obviously we want to help our customers save money, and help them become more profitable. So as you can kind of get from what I'm saying, and I could probably go on for hours here, we're really looking for partnership, very healthy, good discussions to basically unearth initiatives and savings programs. And Jared, to kind of get back to one of your questions, is that what our customers are expecting? I think there's a level of expectation in terms of onboarding, but what we found to be very beneficial is that above and beyond that we include in our onboarding process. So there's a level of expectation, but I also think that customers look at that and go, "Wow, this thing is really meaty," and that's going to really help them and us collectively going forward.
Yeah, it's interesting because sometimes you almost have to get the client, you almost have to get them on board before you can start unpacking the value, because you can't really put it into your little brochure that you're going to hand to them, be like, yeah, we're going to do all of this for you. It's really hard to sort of package.
Yep.
Mhm.
And Gord, I was going to ask you, but maybe Barnaby, you might want to jump in on this as well. Does the client, how would I say it? Are they in the value add? Is it as much about the cost of the product coming from you as opposed to the savings? If you're, I'm not holding you to these numbers. I'm saying if you're cutting fuel consumption by 2.5% or 3% or whatever, or 5, I don't know what sort of metrics you'd be looking at. I'm sure it varies per client.
Mhm.
Is the value add in the product line or in the performance?
The benefit is in the performance and the savings, the total saving solutions to the customer. And I'll give you an example. The customer I alluded to earlier that was running a light hydraulic oil in the winter and a heavier hydraulic oil in the summer. We had worked with them to find that they wanted to eliminate the seasonal changes. So we recommended a multi-graded synthetic oil that could be used in that application. And what we have is we actually have a calculator, which is a spreadsheet with pre-filled formulas and things in it, where we can take the customer's information, what their shop rate is, what they charge or internally bill for a mechanic, what the production rate is for that piece of equipment, so that before we even embark down the road of a trial to look at saving solutions, we can kind of storyboard what that break-even point's going to be. So for this example, we were moving from mineral-based oil to a synthetic multi-grade. So there is an additional cost for the oil, but we looked at that we could take the oil service from a 2,000-hour drain interval to probably a 4,000-hour drain interval. And we were able to achieve certain savings with that. And now we're actually looking at 8, 10, and 12,000 hours for savings intervals, for oil drain intervals.
Wow.
And even with the increased cost of the lubricant, the saving solutions back to the customer at the end of the day over a fleet of say 100 haul trucks was going to be in the neighborhood of several $100,000. So that's where that's where the big savings is coming in.
Because you're talking
As well as
operation and people as well. All that.
right. So those trucks stay in production longer. You actually end up using less lubricant because now instead of changing every 2,000 hours, you're changing, at the end of this program, we're currently running it. Say we go to 8,000 hours, you're using only 25% of the oil that you were using before. So it ends up working out. You reduce costs and equipment's up longer.
Yeah. But Barnaby, this is actually the setup that I wanted to understand, because, okay, so if I'm the client, in this scenario, and I'm saying, okay, so I've got a higher cost product, but it's taking me from 2,000 to 8,000. When does that conversation start happening? Is that within the first day, or is this a program's being implemented and then they start to unpack it? How quickly can you start putting out that type of value, or do you use examples from the first conversation to sort of so they understand some context of what you're planning?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, before I get into that, maybe I'd just like to add a couple words
sure,
to
yeah.
what Gordon was talking about, if that's okay. I look at, you talk about product and performance, and it's really our job, our R&D folks, our tech folks, as an organization, to look at the product and make sure that it's premium and that it delivers benefits. So I would say there's a lot more focus on the product from our end, and then obviously from the customer's end, it's that performance and what it can do. And I think Gord gave a really good example there. And so that's kind of how I would look at that dynamic there between product and performance. And then what I would also add to what Gord said there is, it's one thing, and I have this discussion with customers a lot, is, we say, we've got high performing products, best in class. You can read our literature, there's a ton of proof of performance, field trials, etc. And that's all great. Where I think the magic or the value add comes is, so how do you take that high performing product and then how do you deliver exactly what Gord said? And so that's where our sales tech folks, the experience, the best practices come into play, is how do you do that and how do you do that safely? So, in the example of that Gord gave, where you're extending drains that far out, you want to make sure you're doing it safely, because you want to have a little bit of safety room there, because it makes no sense in pushing it, even though it's a synthetic oil, all the way to the limit. Because anybody that's worked in a mining operation knows, just because you want that haul truck to come in at this period of time, sometimes it might not, physically be possible. So you want to have a little bit of safety stock. You want to have some extra juice in it. And so I think that's where there's, where it marries up nicely in terms of high performing products, and then what we can deliver in terms of the expertise to maximize it out. So I think that's an important part to hammer home here. And then getting back to your question around when do you start, having these discussions around these types of initiatives, cost savings opportunities. I'm just going to throw out and say it depends. If it's a brand new customer, obviously this is not a conversation day one, unless it is a massive issue. You want to work through what I described earlier in terms of setting up your fundamentals, setting up your foundation in terms of who's who, how do you order, how do you cross-reference the products from what they were using, previously to, to our product line, whether it be our Duron heavy-duty engine oils, our Perdurol transmission drivetrain oils like Gord talked about. So there's some, preliminary activities as part of the onboarding process that we need to get completed before we can get to the next more sophisticated pieces like Gord talked about. If it's an existing customer and we've got all that set up, those conversations are ongoing. What we typically will do with the customer is, on an annual and then followed up kind of on a quarterly basis, we sit down, we understand what are they trying to achieve. Where do we see improvements in their operation? Because really, the level of detail we get into, we're almost an extension of our customers, or at least that's the goal. And through that, that develops, these initiatives that can generate savings or maximize uptime. And, there's a lot that can be done. I think in today's world, a lot is digital, but there's nothing like being on site, and that's where the Gords of the world and my sales team and tech team shine. There is really being on site with the customers, having those conversations, seeing the equipment, seeing the problems live, and out of that spits out opportunities where we can save money, increase uptime. So really depends, but that's a primary goal from us from day one.
Yeah, that's a great answer. I got to throw out one last question. And I do it quite often on the show. What about the little guys? the small operators. I mean, it's not as big in numbers, but it's as important to them, their equipment. Sometimes it's personal loans that have their little dozer working and all that sort of thing. What would you recommend? I mean, obviously they're not building, nor would they have the time of some of these smaller operators to sort of engage in that amount of dialogue for a program. What is sort of your and I'll throw it over to either one of you. Maybe Barnaby, start with you and then go over to Gord. What is sort of your advice? If you're at a show and it's someone, they've got a couple machines operating, small operation.
Yeah, no, I'll start by saying our approach is no different, whether it be a small customer or a large customer. The objective in terms of delivering savings, delivering value to our customers doesn't matter whether it's small or large. Obviously, if you've got a smaller operation, the scale, the breadth and the depth is less. But we would take the same philosophy, the same process towards those customers. So, my message to those smaller folks there would be to approach us. Let's have a discussion. You're going to find that, especially with a smaller fleet, we can potentially zero in on root cause, potentially roll out programs that are quicker. Just based off of the knowledge of a Gord Susinski in our tech group, or anyone in the sales team. So I think the first step is to reach out, approach it with an open mind, and I think the dialogue up front is key in terms of sharing information back and forth there.
Gord, over to you. Do you think some of your connections in the industry, having worked in it a long time, are you able to sort of communicate some of these like again, like what me as a kid mixing oils and doing all this stuff that does go on. I mean, it happens. I know because I've been
Sure.
there. Are you able to sort of provide, just even to people, just to sort of that some sort of quick advice and sort of get them on the right track?
Absolutely. And one of the things I want to add is Barnaby's exactly right. The format doesn't change. And one of the things I like to do as a tech guy is when we bring on a new piece of business, whether it's a large mine or a small mine, is we have what we call a lube assessment. Some people call them a lube audit. I like to do like a mini assessment, which involves sitting down with a customer for about an hour and just asking a bunch of questions about their operation and how they lubricate stuff. And to Barnaby's point, there's nothing like being on site. And I like to go for a walkabout, because having been in the business for 30 years, I've been in most of the mines in the Western provinces and the Northwest Territories. What people think is normal doesn't look normal to me, or I will see things that people that work in that operation every day don't see. And it's bringing a renewed look and a fresh set of eyes to an existing operation. So when what I found is, in my experience, is dealing with a smaller mining operation, people will come to us with a problem that is really unique to them and may seem like the end of the world or something catastrophic, which for us is day to day, and
Right.
something that we deal with all the time. And quite often you can deal with it over a phone call. And another thing that I like to tell the smaller mines is, and this goes for the bigger mines, and it comes back to people being more well-informed and willing to do their own searches, is our website has a myriad of things to search out, and product selectors and grease selectors and data sheets and technical reference documents and all kinds of things to search out. And a lot of times, just by typing in a couple of key search words, you can uncover a lot of information before even contacting us. So that stuff's at your fingertips, so that those smaller operations don't have to feel like they're out there alone by themselves.
Yeah, that's and that's probably a great place to sort of wrap up the interview. But it is true, and I will obviously have links to your website and that. I've been on it. These websites nowadays, some people keep it very surface, but when you have these websites that actually give detailed document, the amount of information you can put together is absolutely unbelievable. So we'll make sure to even get a couple links from you, some key links that people can go check out. Barnaby and Gordon, thank you very much for being on the show. It was a lot to cover. You know, it's maybe in the next show we'll have you on site in one of these remote areas.
That would
Talking
be
about
great.
no,
That'd be great.
we really appreciate you being on the show, and there's so much to uncover. Was probably a lot of directions we could have gone, but thanks for sort of walking us through it. I hope you have it back on, and we can sort of unpack some other streams as well.
Excellent. It's been a lot of fun. Our pleasure.
It's been fun, Jared. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Okay, everyone. Yeah, I could have. I went to talk to Gowdy, but she's not recording right now, so I won't do that. There was about probably 20 times where I wanted to take it in a different direction, but I wanted to keep it focused and kind of cover the outline of what they do. So thank you, everybody, for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. We hope HollyFrontier comes back on, and we'll put links to HollyFrontier and the Petro-Canada Lubricants brand. Thank you for watching, and make sure to subscribe, comment, share, like, and send us guests. We used to have about maybe one guest every couple months. Lately, I would say close to half our guests are coming from somebody else. So thank you for helping us out and supporting us. We'll keep bringing you shows and keep unpacking heavy industry, and see you on the next episode of The Crownsman Show.